Hi, welcome everyone to How to Prepare for Your Best Job Interview. We're super excited to have you with us today. As you know, the application season for the BLX internship is now open for summer 2025. So we wanted to make sure that you can put your best foot forward for those of you that are applying. Today we have with us Suzanne Lawrence. She's the CEO of Advisor Business Solutions, and she's our partner at BLX. Her and her team do all of the interviewing with the firms and the interns, and then also do the matching process behind the scenes. So she is on the front lines, literally speaking to the people that will be giving you the job offers, right? So she knows exactly what they're looking for based on tons of conversations and years of having gone through the program. So she has a lot of great stuff to share. So we are very excited to have her. My name is Louis Rosa. I'm one of the co-founders of BLX. We also have Sean Tidlaska, another one of the co-founders. And yeah, Suzanne, take it away.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Luis. Sean, wonderful having you here. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. As Luis said, I'm Suzanne Lawrence, and I have spent a lot of time talking with intern applicants, either in the interview process or even the coaching process to prepare you for getting matched up with financial planning firms. And I wanted to take a little time today to share with you some highlights from our takeaways with interviewing, what's going to give you some competitive edge to your interview style. And I also want you to use this time wisely. If you have questions, if you're not sure about some things during the interview topics that we cover, or you just would like maybe some clarification on maybe things that you experienced with interviews in the past. So I'm happy to answer questions as we go through the presentation, and you don't have to wait till the very end to be able to ask questions. So let's get ourselves started here. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will show up. All right, is that viewable?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so the first thing I just wanted to start off with is letting you all just have sort of a sense of, nervousness with interviews is perfectly normal. And it's fine to have butterflies when you're preparing yourself to actually start the interview process. And just keep in mind that no matter how many times you've gone through interviewing, it's still going to potentially be a time to be nervous. So I will call that good excitement. And how do you maybe think about how do you harness some of that so it doesn't start off a little bumpier than maybe it could if you just overcome some of the nerves. So this is just a quick question. It's usually a poll question, but I'm just going to put it out there for everyone to answer in the chat. Which of these options can help to calm your nerves? I put item A, prepare yourself. Option B, eat breakfast. C, focus on your breathing and pause before you speak. And D, remember you're having a conversation. So if you could put what letter you feel is the correct answer in the chat for us to just get started with what your thoughts are on this. It's not to say that there's any wrong answers, it's just what's the best answer you think that we could use in this scenario. So pick which one you think is the best one. Just we'll give you like 15 seconds to put it in the chat. And, we'll just take it from there. And like I said, there's no wrong answer. It's just what's the best one that you feel would give you the most helpfulness as far as overcoming the nerves. And Luis, can you tell me what you see in the chat?
Oh, yes. We are seeing mostly all of the above, and then some people have put an emphasis on the particular one that has helped them the most.
Mhm,
Erica said D. Remember you having a conversation.
mhm.
I see some C's as well for focus on your breathing and pause before you speak. But it seems like all of the above is definitely throughout.
Okay, that's fine. And that's the overall theme is all of these will be helpful. So that is certainly understandable. What I would say to you as a priority is prepare yourself. And the reason why I say prepare yourself is because the more that you have thought through in your mind for what it is that you want to say, what are your talking points, how well you organize your thoughts ahead of time, believe it or not, the more it's going to help you with feeling less nervous and more ready, even though it's still a nervous type of situation where you'll have butterflies. So put more emphasis in focusing on being prepared for your interview, and that will give you more confidence and it will help you to feel a little more calm when you're starting your next interview. Now, I want to talk a couple of quick minutes about what it means with having one opportunity to make your best first impression. And it's always sometimes sort of important to keep the balance of you're nervous, but at the same time, you're going to want to come out as best as possible with how you initially start this interview discussion. So keep in mind, prepare how you will introduce yourself. What are some of the possible questions that may appear, as well as what are some possible answers? Make sure you understand how you're going to explain or describe every single point inside your application document that you're going to have or on your resume. Because these are the things that usually start off your interview conversation, and that sometimes sets the tone for how it's going to move through the interview process, which is usually going to move pretty quickly. So give yourself some, I'll call it front-ended help with what are some of the things that are going to help you with starting off with a good impression and go from there. So, some of the first impression thoughts. First of all, your appearance. Certainly need to be professionally dressed. Are you well groomed? What's your body language? Are you sitting upright? Are you looking attentive? You have good eye contact? Do you seem interested in what the conversation is being covering? What's your pace of your conversation? Are you talking very fast? Are you talking too slow? You want to think about the pace of how you're speaking and also speaking very clearly and being more polished, avoid unprofessional language. Now, this is going to be the case whether your interview is on Zoom or whether it's in person. So, keeping in mind, if you are Zooming, when it comes to your appearance, not only are you professionally dressed, but what about your camera angle? Are you centered well in the position of the camera so that you can basically be seen shoulders and up? And you want to also make sure your lighting is good. You want to make sure you have a background that looks professional or blurred, but definitely not distracting. I literally have seen people coming into the initial interviews with our teams, and they have posters on the wall and they've got unmade beds behind them. Sometimes it's dark, sometimes they're wearing hoodies. It's really just because it may be even a preliminary interview before you have an interview, you just always want to be professionally dressed and have a very good appearance. Make sure if it's a very sort of formal interview for the gentleman, you want to have a tie and a jacket on. And if you don't have one, if you're a college student, I understand, but find someone in your dorm or someone who you can borrow it from for your interview. It will come across much more polished and professional for your interview first impression. And again, feel free to ask any questions at all while we are on these different topics as we're moving forward. So, what does the company want? If you look at any kind of job post, learn what kind of candidate the firm is looking for a certain position, you want to think about what is the hiring manager looking for from you, as opposed to what is it that you want to tell the hiring manager. So you kind of flip it a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's making sure that your conversation connects and resonates well with the hiring manager. So, what are their expectations? So, what I like to think about is, how can you best explain why you're interested in this role? This is one of, believe it or not, one of the things that we get feedback from the firms after they've interviewed candidates. And it's usually when someone has more interest in expressing, here's why I'm interested in this internship. Here's what appeals to me. And it could literally be something very genuine, like this isn't a field I'm very interested in, even if you're still learning about what the role really entails. But having some sense of connecting with why you're applying with this company is really going to be important. You also want to be able to explain why you would be a good for the company or for. And then last, you want to be prepared to explain your work, volunteer experience, or internship experience at any point during the interview. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a quick second. My camera kicked me off. So I'm going to try to come back in again really fast and see if this will cooperate.
No problem. Yeah, and while you do that, Suzanne, I wanted to add to what you were saying in terms of presentation. I have, when I first started doing virtual, I got myself a green screen that I bought on Amazon. It was pretty cheap. It's actually like a little circle, similar to the material that you would see on those like sun visors that people put on the windshield on their cars when it's too hot. It's something like that, and it fits right behind your chair. Just in case if for whatever reason you can't help your background, that's one great way to be able to kind of create a new background. A lot of the times when you see people on Zoom, if they don't have a green screen, it looks a little blurry, and like if they move, they kind of look a little odd. So that was kind of like my little trick. Just got this little green screen, fits right in the chair, and then Zoom lets you just upload whatever background you want. So I was able to put, like a bookshelf behind me or a nice office. So you can definitely fake the funk, and make it look good.
Absolutely.
Also important too is noise reduction. If you go into the Zoom settings, there is a way where you can reduce some of the background noise, or you can use some apps. There's one called Crisp with a K, Crisp AI. You can Google it, and it's an excellent noise reduction feature. So if you happen to have like kids in the background or a dog or whatever, you can use that, and your mic probably won't pick it up if you have something like that. So there are ways to, if you're home and you can't help your environment, there are some ways to kind of work around it.
And these are all excellent tips because you don't think about it until things don't go well. And then you want to be ahead of it the next time. So, barking dogs or, just noise that's distracting. You literally can't really do anything when you're on camera having the interview and then, the gardener shows up
Yep. I've
or
had that one, the landscaper, lawnmower. Oh man,
or the blower, the blower
the
is the
blower.
annoying one. So what Lewis is suggesting, these are really helpful to just make sure that you make adjustments ahead of when you know you're going to be interviewing, and you will absolutely use them time and time again, because even if you get the interview, you get the position, then there's probably going to be situations where you'll be zooming again, and you can absolutely have your tools ready. So thank you for those suggestions. So going back to the hiring manager expectations, what I want you to also know is we had a session a week ago, and it was about resume writing, and someone had asked about um, experience, that could they use experience that they had from doing volunteer work with their church. And it was really a good question, because sometimes, if you're in college still, or if you're a career changer and you're looking at how do you use some of your experience to be applicable for the interview, you can still talk about, I worked in, a group setting with other people, and, we put together a project. We are all assigned different roles or tasks or responsibilities. These are the ways that you can still tie in having the ability to work in a group setting or work with a team or a staff, even though it wasn't necessarily from another type of position that you've had, that you can speak to from, a paid job type of experience. So what are the expectations? The hiring manager really wants to have a sense of how much preparation you put in to learning about the company before the interview. Did you go on their website? Did you understand or read about their company's values or their culture? Not just what the services are that they provide, but what is it that's important to them? Certainly, a hiring manager wants to have a conversation that's, seeing you have a positive attitude. Sometimes it becomes more of the personality fit as opposed to similar qualifications with other candidates. You can also really help them to talk about anything that you put as far as your resume goes, any kind of explanation of the things that you've done, but also if there's any gaps, being prepared to respond to, here's what happened in the 2-year period where I don't have any experience on my resume. Maybe it was when you decided to go back to school or go to school full time. You didn't want to work at that time. People sometimes have to take breaks for one reason or another. It's fine. Just be prepared to talk about it or explain it, and very briefly. It does not have to be a 5-minute or a long answer. It's just you're being able to be honest with them. This is what happened, and then you move forward. You absolutely want to be mindful of your pace of your conversation. It needs to just be a very engaging conversation. You want to communicate clearly and properly, take time to think about what your next answer is. If you're asked a question and you need to just pause for about 2 or 3 or 5 seconds, that's fine. Just don't feel like you have to rush through your answer because they asked you a question and you had to answer right away. If you need to just take a minute or a brief couple of seconds, pause, put your thoughts together, how you best want to respond, and then go ahead and answer. That's going to just keep the conversation engaging. And it's going to give you the best response that you should give for the next question. You want to avoid any kind of discussion about irrelevant information. Try not to take up too much time with any small talk. Usually the beginning is when, you might have a couple of quick moments, just getting to know each other, a little bit of an icebreaker. But once you get started in the conversation, just let it be consistent with relevant information. Try not to get too much detail about skills that maybe you have, but it's not going to be necessarily needed for the position that you're applying for. So I need you to think about how else you might be able to respond to a question if you don't have a lot of experience or a skill that's being very specific to what the position is asking for. Transferable skills is very important when you're starting out with your career path, as well as if you're changing careers. So, what are some of the things maybe that you should be thinking about that you can apply in this setting of working with a firm who has a staff, who's on computers, who's talking to clients? It's fine for you to not have exact experience, but use skills that you can absolutely say will help to be relevant. If you maybe are just passionate about studying or learning new skills or new technology, that's fine to use that as your response. If you have done other internships or you've done any volunteer pro bono experience that matches up with the industry or aligns with the company's culture, let's say you're applying for a financial planning firm and you haven't done anything specific in the industry, but maybe you helped do some accounting work or helping with organization of bookkeeping or something, with your volunteer work that you've done, or maybe just helping to talk to people, being more conversational with helping other people, and maybe that aligns with the company's culture that you're applying for. So these are all just ways that you can still be relevant, even if you don't have the exact job description or background that the firm is looking for. So, what are some of the skills that the hiring managers are looking for? Well, first of all, communication is key. You really want to be able to make sure you're speaking confidently about yourself. You can maybe think about explaining what are some of the accomplishments that you've had. So here's an example. If you maybe have, let's say, done a project at school with other um, classmates, or you had to have some kind of collaborative environment on projects, maybe you can talk about something where you were helpful in organizing a team project and something that you want to be able to speak of. Our team ended up getting an A on the project, or we were acknowledged or recognized for being very organized. Whatever you can pull from, that's things that you can point to as accomplishments. Those are the types of bullet points I want you to think about for your talking points. Are you able to also be expressive in a professional manner? You need to practice that, how you will answer your questions, and avoid saying yes or no. if you're asked a question. You want to always be able to elaborate on what the hiring manager's questions are about so they can just have a sense of how do you explain your feedback? How do you explain what it is that you're describing? Communication is very, very important. It's also going to help the hiring manager think about how well you will be communicating with other people who you will be working with. So I want you to be mindful of your nonverbal communication, your posture, your eye contact, how well are you looking at whoever it is who's interviewing you. Sometimes it's more than one person, sometimes it's a panel. You want to feel very clear and confident with your answers. You also want to make sure you're keeping the the pace of the conversation so that if, let's say, your questions are being asked, you're giving a 2 to 3 minute response. That's sort of the momentum you want to keep throughout the interview. Try to avoid having very lengthy answers because you're only probably going to have a limited amount of time with your interview. Many firms schedule 30-minute interviews, so they get to ask you maybe 5 questions, and then that interview is over. So you want to make sure you're allowing enough time for the hiring manager or whoever is interviewing you to be able to ask the questions they want to ask you and not give too much detail in your answers so that they're super long with how long it takes. The other thing is it allows for the hiring manager to ask you an additional question based off what it is that your responses are. So that's meaning that they're actually learning more about you, and that's why they want to ask you further questions instead of going on to the next question. Pace yourself. When it comes to writing and research, this is just a tip that I wanted to share with everyone because writing and research is something, particularly in the financial planning industry, that a lot of firms really appreciate. And having you be able to talk to any kind of writing skills or projects or research reports that you've done in the past is very, very helpful. We actually do request now, or I believe even added it on the application for the internship program to attach any writing samples. So that could be research reports, any kind of team projects that you've worked on. If you have any blogs or social posts that are relevant to the industry, sometimes people might have done, just because it's of interest, financial literacy topics um, when it comes to saving money or reducing debt. Maybe at tax season, it's a reminder, organize your paperwork to be prepared before the deadline. Um, any kind of information that is something that you do just as a hobby or you've done it as a special project, these are all really helpful for firms to see what you have done in the past. Any kind of newsletters or articles, samples, they're always very helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point, Suzanne. In this field, we do a lot of communicating with clients via email and so on. And if you're going to be hired, you're going to be representing the firm in some capacity. And at some point, you may have direct communication with the firm's clients. So usually, as the advisor or the owner of the firm, you want to make sure that the person that is out there communicating with your clients is definitely capable of doing so without using like short form like you would do on a text, for example, with a friend, things of that sort. So yeah, I think those writing samples are very helpful to see how the person's able to communicate.
And actually, we have a few firms that just um, sign up with us every year, we already know. Don't even necessarily ask them, do you want to see writing samples? You basically look at who has provided writing samples because they're going to really be more receptive to any kind of candidates who have something to demonstrate other than having the interview itself. So it honestly will really be a helpful, like I said, it's like a value add. If you do have things that you could include, it's absolutely helpful to even get the interest for the firm to select you for an interview. So, as far as technology goes, technology is a very big deal with most firms that want to hire people who have some level of proficiency with technology. It doesn't mean that you have to be, a coder or someone who's really specialized in different kinds of tech, but you absolutely want to be able to talk about or share what your knowledge is and experience working in different software. So, CRM, customer relationship management programs, are incredibly useful and important in the financial planning industry because most people will have their client information in a CRM and the notes are added, and that's just standard. So they would rather have candidates who understand the usage of CRM, even if it's a different program, but having the ability to know how to look up customers, how to look up information in programs like Salesforce or um, even Outlook, Monday.com, just having some kind of experience is very helpful. Google Docs are used with a lot of firms, smaller size firms usually, as opposed to large enterprise firms, but they are absolutely standard now. If you have office experience, but maybe you do more on Word than you do on Excel, that's fine. It's normal. It kind of depends on the coursework that you've taken. If you're not doing a lot of spreadsheets and calculations and formulas, you might not be using as much Excel. But if you are, then it's helpful to be able to even indicate that that's a stronger skill set that you have for working with numbers and spreadsheets. Or if you know any kind of software for colleges that's, again, transferable programs, that's fine. If you have hobbies, creating websites or social media, platforms, posts, all of these are all great examples of how you're using technology already. And that gives the hiring manager a better sense of your ability to learn what they're using, even though if you have not used it before. So let's think a couple of minutes about some of the interview questions that hiring managers really, what they're really trying to figure out. And the 2 points I wanted to make about that is they're thinking about how likely are you going to succeed at the job responsibilities that you will have, and how well will you fit in with the other staff for asking questions or needing clarification. Now, the feedback that we've had in the past is even if you can interview well, but if you get the position and you are assigned tasks, how well do you work independently? If you are working independently and you don't know what to do, or if you're stuck, are you going to ask questions? Are you going to ask for help? Or are you going to try and figure it out and possibly not get the tasks done in the time that you were expected to get them completed? So you want to think about how will your description of the experience that you do have kind of weave in some of this information so that they have a sense of, kind of like that group project example I was saying earlier. If you work with other people, how do you assign each other what we're going to be doing together as a group? How did you work together as a group? And then how can you convey that as part of your description to a hiring manager of I've worked with groups in different projects, and here's some of the things that each of us took on as responsibilities, and my role was X. These are all ways that the hiring manager now thinks, oh, okay, so if you're hired and you're assigned to do certain tasks, they will feel more likely that you will raise your hand when you need help. You'll be proactive, you won't be reactive. That's very important to a hiring manager. Now, what are a couple of the most common interview questions that we could suggest for you to prepare and to just recommend you practice these questions with what are the best ways for you to answer them? We always open it up with tell me about yourself because that is probably the number one way that people get tripped up on their interview. The first thing that you go kind of from small talk or chit chat when you open up the conversation with the hiring manager, and then the transition can quickly go to an open ended tell me about yourself. How will you answer that? You want to figure out what are the key talking points. Always say three things that you want to bring up if they ask you, tell me about yourself. How can you keep a list short, sweet, and to the point, but it's still very engaging and it gives a little snapshot of your personal situation, your background, and why you are communicating this to the hiring manager in a way that they are interested. Also, one of the questions that a lot of hiring managers get is why are you applying for this position or why are you interested? And I will tell you that the feedback that we get from hiring managers often will be potentially sidelining someone saying, I like them, but they really didn't seem interested in our position, or they didn't seem interested in the opportunity because based on what their answer was. And it certainly could be, I need a job, or I need experience, or I need something that's going to help. But you want to put a little more thought into what is it that will be more of a compelling reason why you're interested in the position. Also, what makes you unique, the reason why we put that out there is because you are going to be interviewing and competing with other candidates, maybe with similar backgrounds or similar types of experience. So there should be one or two things that you can bring in the conversation that will help to set you apart from everyone else. If you have any specific career goals, that would be good for you to think about what would you want to say, what your career goals are, even if they're not crystal clear, but they can at least give an indication of the path you want to follow. If you've had any kind of challenges or conflicts you had to overcome in the past, sometimes they'll just kind of put that question out there in the mix just to see how you would respond. If it's professional, that's clearly a better type of scenario. But even if it's something that's personal, that's okay too. It's just I want you to be able to pull from any experiences that you might feel would be appropriate for how you would respond, and so you're not kind of thrown off or how will I answer this and stumble your way through the answer. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Almost always, people will ask you that. And strengths and weaknesses. Now, this is another question that sometimes throws people off. Like, how will I answer that? And typically, I would say they're not necessarily any wrong answers, but you want to think about what would help a hiring manager feel that you were a sort of a staff or team member that can help be reliable and help to add value to the staff that is already there. So it would be something that's going to maybe benefit, how you can collaborate with other people. What are some of the things that maybe you can emphasize on your strength with being organized or being efficient or tech savvy, but things that are going to potentially impact other team members is always helpful for a hiring manager to hear that. And I also always suggest you have at least two questions to be able to ask the hiring manager, because they want to know, well, what are your questions for us? What do you want to know? This is a way to stay connected with what's important for them to hear coming from you. So usually we always suggest go on the website before you meet with the firm, find out as many things as you can, what their services are, if they have a mission statement, if they have a value proposition, anything that's usually tied to their culture, um, who are the clients that they serve. These are all things that are really good ways to maybe ask questions, one or two, that are tied to information that you can see ahead of time before the interview. And there's no such thing as a wrong question, but you do want to show that you put some thought into it. It's always important to very much be honest and answer truthfully when it comes to interviewing. If you're applying for a job, be honest with about yourself and about your background. Let the interviewer know your strong points, but also be truthful about your weak points. Everyone always tries to be impressive, but your best bet is to be honest and genuine. That's what's going to resonate with a hiring manager.
Suzanne, I have a question about that.
Hmm.
How do we find a balance between vulnerability and not looking bad with your answer? Because obviously, like nobody wants to talk about their weaknesses or a prior experience that wasn't the greatest. So I was just wondering, can we somehow like admit it, right? But flip it into something like, here's what I've done about it, here's what I am doing about it, here's what I learned from it, to not just leave it at like, hey, here's my weakness, period.
Yes, weakness is probably after tell me about yourself. That's the second biggest question that we get a lot of. How do I answer that? And I always suggest, and I know our team does as well, um, what we want you to do is, you know, maybe just come up with one weakness suggestion that also has here's how I've addressed it. Okay, so let's say, and one of the common things that we've heard is, I take on too much work. I don't know how to say no when someone asks for help. They'll say, I pretty much want to, help as many people as I can, but sometimes I'm so, overloaded with what I have to do for my own work. If I add on more responsibilities by saying I'll help people, then I just get overwhelmed. So one of the things that we say is, okay, that's if that's what your weakness is, the ability to sometimes forget to not volunteer, you can then basically say, But now I look at how much work I have before I'll give the answer of yes or no, so that I've made an adjustment instead of just saying yes all of the time that I will help someone. I will make an adjustment and say, I really would like to help you, but I can't take on any more work right now. So you have a way of self-correcting if that is the weakness that you're bringing up. So just think about what would be something that might come across as this is my weakness, but this is how it's now being addressed. So I don't have that same problem that keeps continuing. And that will just resonate better with a hiring manager to just say, oh, okay, that's good to know. And usually then you just move on to whatever the next question is.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you are going to still put that emphasis being yourself, just focus on being honest and coming across as honestly as you can. It may seem like, oh, that's not a good answer. That's not, helpful, but honestly, it's going to help you to be more memorable. When you finish your interview, make sure that you have the contact info for the people who are interviewing you and stay in touch. Remember, the firms that are interviewing you are very busy. A lot of the time, they're busy trying to do their own work and they're trying to schedule in interviews for however many positions that they're trying to fill. And it's often that the firms will say at the end, we'll be in touch. We're going to have more interviews. We'll probably be reaching out to you in another week or two, but it's still good to be able to keep your pulse on how much time has passed. If you felt the interview went well, for when you should touch base with them again and email back to say, hi, we had an interview last week. I really enjoyed meeting with you. I'm just checking to see if there's been any updates on, your next steps, something to that effect.
And Suzanne, we have one question
Okay.
from the audience is when going through multiple rounds of interviews, should you send a thank you email after each round?
It depends on is it's the same person or is it different people? I would say, multiple rounds. It could be certainly, I'll just use the number 3. Let's say it's, there's the first person, maybe that's HR. The second person is the person who would actually be who you're working with. And maybe the third is the decision maker for who gets hired on their team. So those are potentially 3 different sets of people that you'd be interviewing with in that case, then yes, I would say make sure that because you'll have their contact information to be able to schedule the interview with them. So I would suggest, yes, go ahead and respond to them each round, each time. If it's the same person, but they're adding on someone else in the additional rounds, then I would put the new person and the same hiring manager or office manager, whoever it is, that you're sending it to, and just address the email to both of them.
All right.
And then I see there's another question that came in.
Oh yeah, the question is the initial interview with a firm or with BLX? So the initial interview is going to be with BLX, it's going to be Suzanne Lawrence's team. So when you apply to our program, you don't apply to a specific firm in the same way that firms don't request a specific intern. So basically, you apply to the program, and then based on what firms are looking for, what's available, and also the candidates, what they're looking for, their skill set, Suzanne's team makes the match. And then ultimately, once the firms are presented with good matches, they would, if they're interested, they'll go ahead and extend an initial interview with the candidate directly. So you're definitely gonna have the initial first interview with BLX team first, and then with whatever firm you, if you end up matching with one.
And typically, the the points that we're going to help you with is we will, as Lewis said, we will help you with the initial interview. Then we will also reach out to you to ask you if you have been requested to meet with firms, and we give you the information. We'll offer, would you like to do an interview prep round together? And we'll give that opportunity to pretty much everybody who we schedule an interview with for the firm. It's up to each individual if they feel like they would like another interview to just specifically prep for the interview with the firm, so that you're feeling like, you have a little bit more ability to make changes with your talking points. We want you to have potentially at least two interviewing rounds before you are matched up with, before you actually would interview with any of the firms.
We have another question, Suzanne. Is it okay to ask for feedback from your interviewer if you end up not getting the position?
What I would say is you should probably reach out to our team. So whoever was the one, on the matchmaking team, we all have shared notes from what, everyone who has been sent out for interviewing. Usually it's probably more expeditious if our team finds out what the feedback is, because we always get the feedback anyway after we send out the candidates to the firms. So we'll probably already have the feedback if there is something that's already come back from the firm. There's just a lot of activity going on when we're matching up firms with intern candidates, and they usually are interviewing several people depending on how many interns they're looking to hire. So I would just suggest, after you're contacted, after your interview with the ABS team, usually there's only a couple of people who are actually helping on the interviewing side for the interns. They will be emailing you anyway to say, here's the firm you're going to be interviewing with, and either they're going to set it up directly with the firm or our team will set it up. So there's going to be several back and forth email before you even have your interview. And then after your interview, we'll get the feedback from the firm after they've completed all of their interviews with the different candidates. So it's probably just going to be faster and easier to get the response from our matchmaking team. Otherwise, you'll end up in the black hole. Not that anyone's trying to delay it. It's just a buzz of activity that's happening at that point where everyone is doing interviews.
Yeah, definitely. We have
So
a few more minutes. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them either in the chat or in the Q&A. And
absolutely.
I wanted to add a little bit to what you were saying earlier, Suzanne, about the transferable skills. We have a lot of people that are either newer to the profession, like a student, or a career changer. So both could sometimes not have the traditional required experience for certain roles, but we find that typically there are ways for you to tie something you've done in the past or are currently doing in your current role that could be transferable. We've had teachers come through our program and they're like, yeah, like I have listening skills, I have empathy, right? Like you're dealing with students. I mean, these are a lot of skills that you're going to need to work with a client, right? I always tell people like you can always learn the tech, right? The financial planning software, whatever. But if you have the people skills and you can demonstrate that, like, yeah, maybe I haven't worked in this field long enough or at all, but here's what I've done in the past, and here how that translates. I think it's very key because then the employer is more open to you not having the quote unquote traditional experience requirement.
And to chime in on that, remember that the financial planning industry is a relationship industry. We are very big on client relationships here. So that's a very positive skill set, as Lewis is mentioning, because in the back of the hiring manager's mind, they want to see that as just part of one of your strengths, as far as you can learn a lot of things along the way, but having the ability to build relationships, whether you're learning, from a operations or from a client support role to working your way into becoming an associate advisor or someone who's getting to know clients on a relationship level. That's a huge plus for as many people who are interested in going in that path to have.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. This is recorded, so we will post it on our website and we'll be sending out the links to everyone that registered as well. So thank you all for attending. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to us at info@blxinternship.org. I'm going to put it in the chat. And we look forward to seeing your applications come through if they haven't already.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. It was a pleasure being here today.